An interesting debate going on at the UN level. Sweden and many of their female trade ministers and cabinet ministers, including Trade Minister Anne Lind, visited Iran the other day and they were photographed taking pictures with President Rouhani, and all of these female ministers in the self-proclaimed first feminist government in the world were donning hijabs and chadors, according to UN Watch. And is this a problem, or is it just a case of sort of when in Rome? Hillel Neuer is a former Montrealer, executive director of UN Watch, and he joins us now from Geneva. Mr. Neuer, nice to talk to you again.
Pleasure to be here.
First of all, we're Canadian, and we like to be very accommodating, of course, and polite. And why? Tell me why you believe this is not just a case of when in Rome.
Well, Canadians have a charter of rights and freedoms, and we believe in freedom. And the issue here is exactly that. Everyone should have the right to wear what they want to wear. If they want to wear a hijab to cover their hair, if they want to wear a burkini on the beach, they should have that right. But if they don't want to wear those things, they should also have that right. And in Iran today, that is not the case. There is an oppressive, discriminatory, and unjust law that singles out women and says that from the young age, the age of 5 or 7 years old, they have to cover their hair for the rest of their lives. They cannot feel the wind in their hair, and many other aspects of this modesty law for which hundreds of thousands, if not millions, are arrested. And when Sweden's self-declared first feminist government in the world, which has a website declaring their, quote, feminist foreign policy, when the leader of that feminist foreign policy, Anne Lind, who's listed as one of the 3 female ministers who leads that feminist foreign policy, when she shows up in Iran with a massive delegation headed by the Swedish prime minister to do lucrative business deals with this regime, and then they not only refuse to protest this oppressive, unjust law, but go above and beyond. Anne Lind didn't just wear the hijab, she also wore this long black coat, and the pictures of her are just abject kowtowing to an oppressive, misogynistic regime. It's the very opposite of what a feminist foreign policy would look like.
So here in Quebec, as I'm sure you're aware, we had this debate over the failed sovereignist charter of values, and they would ban the wearing of hijabs in the public sector. That you would probably agree is wrong, because the choice still remains, should remain with the individual women. In Iran, since you're forced to cover your hair, that's where your objection comes in.
That's right. It's a question of freedom, and a society should respect freedom of religion. And if people want to wear a religious head cover, it should be their right. And, there's another question if someone is a government functionary and a civil servant or something, that raises a whole other set of issues. But that's not where we are now. The law in Iran says that every woman and girl has to cover their hair and has to adopt other strict modesty laws, which many Muslims reject and say that it's not part of their tradition. But whatever is the case, there's a woman named Masih Alinejad. She is a Iranian journalist, a women's rights activist who had to flee Iran a couple of years ago because she asked tough questions that the regime didn't like. She created a website called My Stealthy Freedom on Facebook, and it has over 1 million followers. And on that Facebook page, she invites women in Iran to resist that discriminatory law and to show their hair uncovered. And it's an act of defiance. It's an act that can get them arrested and beaten and flogged. And thousands of women do it. And you just see their pictures and their statements, and you see men who support them. There was a movement this past summer where men were wearing hijabs to show that they too identify with the women who are subjugated in this way. Everyone should have the right to do what they want. And if they want to wear religious headgear, it should be their right. But if they don't want to, it shouldn't be forced upon them. And for a Swedish government that declares itself to be the avant-garde of feminism in the world today, to go there and have more than half a dozen women wear coats, covering their hair in the hijab, and strolling past Iran's President Rouhani. It was just a despicable sight, and it was such a sharp contrast because just 1 week ago, the deputy prime minister of Sweden, Isabella Lövin, she made this famous tweet and then an op-ed in The Guardian where she basically, mocked President Trump for his anti-abortion stance. And she did a picture of her surrounded by half a dozen women and emphasizing her government's pro-women policies. And she wrote this op-ed in The Guardian saying that we need leadership in the world on women's rights. So to have that image on Twitter and then just not a week later to have one image after another of these Swedish female cabinet ministers wearing the hijab and what looks like a chador and other such garments really showed the emptiness of their foreign policy. And the other contrast is this same week we have the Women's World Chess Championship in Tehran. And the U.S. chess champ, a woman named Nazi Paikidze Barnes, who's 23 years old, refused to go to Tehran because she did not want to be forced to wear a hijab. All the women players from around the world have to play chess wearing a hijab or they can't go. And she says, I'm basically banned because I want to stay uncovered, and I'm basically banned from this. She refused to go. There's an article in Marie Claire magazine this February about her, and it says, a chess queen who refused to be a pawn. She's a hero. She's a real feminist, and the Swedish self-declared feminists of this government are not.
Finally, one last question. In terms of diplomacy, you obviously watch the machinations of the United Nations. There are several governments that could be described as Islamist, including Iran's. How do you engage in diplomacy with an Islamist government? And do you have to make some of these moral concessions once in a while just to get your voice in there and get your perspectives in the door?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the UN because I'm speaking to you from Geneva and right across the street from the Human Rights Council, where yesterday Sweden took the floor at the Human Rights Council to say that they're proud to announce that they're going to introduce a resolution on the situation of human rights in Iran. So while they're announcing that they're going to introduce this text on Iran, meanwhile their prime minister and their ministers are showing that they really don't care about human rights at all in Iran. And I know that they said that behind the scenes they talked about it, but you can see in Iranian state media there was no mention of it. They went there for lucrative business trade deals. That's what this is all about. So yes, we can have a very interesting discussion about how do you achieve change, are there diplomatic ways to achieve change, and it's a very interesting discussion. But the fact is that this Iranian fundamentalist regime has been in power for 40 years. They're not interested in changing the way that they treat women, gays, bloggers who dare to speak their mind. They're thrown into prison. They're persecuted. Minors are executed. This is the Iranian regime, which is also complicit in a very serious way with the genocide taking place in Syria. 500,000 people killed, largely with the help of Iran and its client Hezbollah. This is the true Iran. So we should be seeing a diplomacy that is assertive and confident and supporting human rights, not this compliance, which is all about running into Tehran to get lucrative trade deals with this despicable regime.
Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of UN Watch, joining us from Geneva. Thank you so much again for your insight today.
My pleasure.